and today I want to talk to you about communication. They say that the quality of your life depends on the quality of your relationship and the quality of your communication. And I want to talk about relationships, but I want to focus on communication because that's where I can really use more practice. And so what I thought is I'd focus on the three different aspects of the communication that I think are most important, which is the communication styles with each other, in relationships, and then the one with ourselves. So in terms of communication, we think communication is just words, and that is true 7% of the time. But the majority of the way we communicate is through our body, and then also tone is the other 11%. So when you're talking to somebody and they're saying one thing, but their body is like conveying a different message, meaning like, is their posture closed, like arms folded, legs crossed, and they're kind of small, versus kind of like, that's someone that's kind of like not sure. But if someone's just more open and their stance is more open, I would go with the body language, because 9 times out of 10, that's the truth. So probably why actions speak louder than words saying comes along. And one really important aspect of communication, we don't think it's communication, but it's listening. This is where I really can use a lot of help and or more practice, and I appreciate I've got really amazing friends that have put up with me just blurting or interjecting, and I totally, and I think, I need to be a better listener. So this is where it's more for me, where the type of listening that they, one of the Vietnamese monks, Thich Nhat Hanh, he wrote a book called The Art of Communication, which I really, really highly recommend. But he goes into it where it's not just active listening, but deeply listening. And that just means that you're just really present with them. You're not trying to listen, you're not listening to like respond or to defend, which, it's naturally, we just are wired to kind of do that. But you're just really being present with them and just taking it in. And one of the ways to let them know that you're genuinely listening is called mirroring, meaning like if, they say a little thing and then just summarize a little bit and repeat it back to them. Sometimes I do that. It just depends if they're talking to me about something and I just I'm not really sure of the topic or what they're saying, I will just mirror back what they said is, this is what I heard, and just and is this what you meant? Because obviously, if it's something important that they're conveying to you, you want to make sure that you get what they're saying and not, not like interpret it in what you think that they're saying. So another an example that I think is really great in communication is, I learned this really young from one of my great, great friends, which is volunteering your thoughts or what you think, criticism, information, without them soliciting it. So how I learned this, one of my friends early on, and he's just one of these dear people to me, he did something and I just blurted out like what I thought he should do better or how he could be better. And he was like, he was just kind about it. He could have, been rude and it would have been appropriate, but he just said, if you want someone to really hear you and get positive feedback, you might want to just ask them hey, this is what I thought. Do you want to hear what I have to say? And if they say yes, then that opens them up to being more receptive to what you have to say. Whereas if you just blurt it out and they're like, okay, who do you think I didn't, where is this coming from? I didn't ask for your opinion. They're going to be more closed off. We all have our different communication styles, but I feel like this has been an important lesson for me because I'm just usually volunteering information or what I think is right. But this, I feel like, has served me well and helped me be a better communicator. Now, one of a common communication style is being passive aggressive, which is like a hidden, in terms of psychology, it's just hidden and repressed anger. So for some reason as a child, if they were muted or if they were disregarded or dismissed, they got the information like they're not important and their thoughts aren't important. So they're, and as kids, we look to our parents or primary caretakers, and they, we use them, they're our world. And so if they're telling us, no, what you say is not good, then we interpret that as, oh no, we're not good. So we tend to kind of turn inward and internalize that. So if we don't grow out of that as an adult, we tend to use indirect language, and it's like motivated by anger a little. So for instance, let me give you an example. So like in a workplace, you have a coworker who asks, hey, you know, can you do this? And really you don't want to do it, but you say, yeah, sure. But then you do it in a haphazard way, or you do it where it's like, you just kind of, you don't do a good job. You kind of sabotage the situation. And then if the person comes back to you, and they're like, what happened? And you're like, oh, well, I didn't have time, or I got so busy, or something. You just make up excuses. And you think that you're really hurting them because, you think, well, you didn't really want to do it anyway. But ultimately, that's really hurting yourself, because you're not doing yourself a favor. Ultimately in life, is about, your actions speak about yourself, and so you're not really hurting the other person, which you think you are. You're really hurting yourself. One of the quotes that I like to also by the Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh is he relates that in terms of like sabotaging. You think you're sabotaging someone when really you're hurting yourself is when your house is on fire. You, rather than going and attending to the house and like putting out the fire, you go after the person. So your house burns down when you should be attending to that, but because your misdirected anger kind of took you to the arsonist, it's like now you have nowhere to live. So it's just hard. I mean, we all have these little tendencies here and there, but it's just kind of important to see, where if you kind of, if you are engaging in conversation and you feel like you want to say one thing but you're doing another, that's a good, like learning curve. That's a good time to go, okay, well, I need to speak up more and be more direct, and that'll help you. The other thing too with passive aggressive people is they tend to test a lot. Like, because they can't be direct, and they'll test you, and it's kind of like test your patience, and it's just really exhausting to be on the other end of the spectrum. And again, more so for me, how I look at this is like, we all are trying to do the best we can, and that's how I look at it. When I see someone and passive aggressive is their kind of way of communicating, I tend to think, okay, on some level as a child, they were taught this one way that they weren't like worthy on some level, and they didn't evolve out of it. So, and that's the thing, if we don't evolve out of our little, childhood neuroses, as an adult, they don't serve us. As a child, they do, because that's all we have, but as an adult, they sabotage a lot. But dealing with, you run into these people a lot, and where the testing thing comes a lot is when you're in like relationships, because we tend to be vulnerable. We tend to think, we can't really express, just because relationships, I'll go into this a little bit more later, but relationships, we tend to, they tend to bring out our most vulnerability, just because we really care. And when you really care, you associate things with like life and death scenarios. And so being vulnerable, we don't want to feel rejected, because that seems like death and outcast. So we tend to kind of test the waters. But it's just not a very good form of communication if you want to really build rapport with that person. Now, in kind of like a segue to that is also talking to someone who's like emotionally charged. And politics obviously comes to mind, because we are very polarized usually. And just so you know, emotions will always trump logic, because emotions technically, according to I think it's Dr. Joe Dispenza, he said that emotions, it's our first language. So meaning when a baby comes born and he they don't know words, but they cry. And so we as parents, we go to them and try to figure out their needs. And so the emotions is kind of hardwired in our brain, and in our old brain. And so when you talk about heated subjects that are very polarizing, emotions will flare. And so what I do because I understand this, I know that if someone is really emotionally charged, I understand that, okay, I'm not going to be able to have I have to meet them where they are. Meaning I'm not going to try to like overdo them and outshout them, but I'm like, okay, I'm just going to give them the floor. It's going to probably be a one-way street, meaning they're going to be just doing the constant talking, so I'm just going to listen, because they're not going to be capable of hearing what I have to say. Now, however, how I can get them to kind of think is, because I'm not going to change their stance on what they believe, because emotions are like directly rooted and to the beliefs, and beliefs are directly rooted to our identities, and we don't challenge anything that is rooted in our identity, because that's who we are. But how you can kind of influence someone is maybe asking questions. Like if they're, if they think one way, just kind of, and you think, maybe that's not maybe the most ideal way, just kind of ask them questions to kind of get them to think, because then you're planting seeds. Because anytime where we come to our own conclusion, we'll accept that. We trust our trusted sources, we trust our, like the power authority figures, and we trust our own, our own thought process. So just kind of question, or pepper them with questions to kind of get them to think about why they think what they do. And then also too, you get a kind of insight into their psyche, and just, learn more about them as a person. And the quote that, and like also too, it's like their way, with someone who's really emotionally charged, that sets up just the stage to like a right and wrong kind of dynamic. And you don't want to get into that. One of my favorite quotes I love from Rumi is, he says there's a, beyond right and wrong, there's a field. Let's meet there. And so anytime I'm probably, we all have our biases. I know I certainly do. And I love talking to people with different thought processes than me, because since I, kind of understand how psychologically things work, I like to kind of challenge myself and see, okay, where are my biases that I can kind of upgrade or, and help. Help me facilitate to be a better communicator and a listener. And it's just hard not to be judgmental, but you want to maintain that, that this, when you're talking to someone who doesn't want to hear what you have to say and they're just kind of, just going on and on, just remember that this is just only one aspect of who they are. This isn't the complete totality of that person. And like I said, we all have our biases, and we're all walking contradictions. It's just because we, a lot of us, we tend to deal with our ideal self, which is rooted in our ego, than our real self. And a lot of times, for me, that's what I listen to when I meet people and they start talking. I just kind of want to see if they have like a healthy dance between the two. So that's just what I want to say about that, in terms of I'm talking to people that have differing viewpoints than you. On to romantic relationship communication. Now I love relationships, hence Relationship Sherpa. But I don't know if you know the 5 Romantic Languages by Gary Chapman, but they are affection, they are acts of service, giving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. So we usually bounce between we usually have 2 dominant ones, and then the other 3 are recessive, but we all have a little bit of each. But it's really important, when you're in a relationship, that you kind of, communication again is kind of hard enough, because it's you feel kind of vulnerable. If you're really in love, you tend to not know how to navigate the water sometimes. If you guys get to, I know I do. I have roommates that can testify to that. But it's just kind of for me, I know my love language, and they vary sometimes, but I just know that, for instance, if you have a love language of physical, touch and quality time, and your significant other is giving you gifts or attention, you're kind of you're not on the same page. And so, my friend, she loves acts of service, and so her boyfriend is pretty good at that, meeting that. And so, it means that they're happy. The thing with relationships, the currency of all relationships, is attention, first and foremost, and then communication. So this is also another area where I can use a lot of help, because you tend to think yeah, body language is really important, and a lot of times women, we're kind of socially conditioned to, we tend to, we're better at social reading in terms of body language. So for me, I think I'm really great at it, but I don't think my guy friend thinks so, but at times. Because I have like gone way off on the deep end because he hasn't texted a certain way, he didn't use a certain emoji, and it just is like, okay, I could have just like said, hey, this is what I'm feeling, but I'm working on that, because, again, it makes you vulnerable, but, you end up, what I like to say is that, I'd rather deal with the real issue at hand than some imaginary figment of my imagination. But sometimes I stay my figment of imagination, but I'm working on that. And lastly, the communication with yourself, I think, is the most important. We tend to forget that, the greatest relationship is the one with ourselves, and the way we communicate with ourselves is so important. We tend to just forget that we are our best friends. And how would you talk to your best friend if they came to you and, they were like sad, or, something didn't go wrong? You wouldn't go, you're a loser, you messed up. I mean, you may say, you want to tell them the truth, but that's not how you would communicate with them like that. So you shouldn't do that with yourself. You should always use words that are like empowering. You should, your self-dialogue should be, real, but like in a positive way, like you would talk to a friend. I just think like we are just so hard on ourselves, and it's just like the accepted norm, but that isn't normal. I mean, we need to like cherish ourselves like we would cherish a good friend, or our favorite pet animal. The thing that you really want to remember is that we're always, we're just all trying to do the best we can. And what I like to live by, my motto is like, whoever I'm with, I want, when I leave, I want them to feel better about themselves. And the best way to do that is through communication. And just to know that you're always communicating. Just because, the way I'm sitting, I'm communicating something. My hand gestures are communicating something. The emphaticness that I really, care about a subject or care about someone. So it's just, we're always communicating. We don't think we are, but we do. And just to always remember to, leave people feeling better, because they, you interacted with them. And if you go, I think, through life that way, I think you'll be A-okay. Thank you so much for listening to me and being here with me, and just know that you are enough and that you're so loved. See you later. Bye.